Hello and welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Kerber, and today I'm sitting down with Rachel Andras, who's a seasoned fly fisherwoman and fly fishing instructor, a busy mom of two, and a certified health coach. As a person who lives intentionally with no regrets, Rachel is using her many talents to help people thrive. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'd like to start with talking about your experience in the fly fishing industry because you've worked in this industry since 1995 and you have spent time guiding, you've instructed, you've worked on the retail side, you've directed schools, and probably everything else in between. How did you get interested in fly fishing and being part of this outdoor space?
I first fell in love with fly fishing because I have an older brother and I have two older brothers, but one introduced me to fishing at a very young age. It wasn't until college that I was dating someone who introduced me to a fly rod, and I just fell in love with it. I loved going to the North Carolina mountains. We would drive 5 hours every weekend. We'd catch fish the size of my pinky on little parachute atoms and just watching their little mouths come up and eat my fly. I never had to learn to cast. Like, it was just like super simple, and it was exactly where I needed to be when I was 20. And then I learned that fish are bigger at different places. I grew up in North Carolina. I went on a trip to Colorado back in high school, and I just fell in love with the West. The fish were bigger out west, and I just had a pull towards the West Coast. And so after college, I asked for a plane ticket to go see a friend out in New Mexico. I got to fish the San Juan River and fish this big water that I didn't know what to do in. Then I learned about a new technique. For 3 days, I was fishing nonstop. People were catching fish all around me. I was like, what's the deal? What's wrong with me? Why can't I catch a fish? And finally, something clicked, and I started to read my line better, my indicator, everything about it. Thank goodness on the last day before I'm supposed to fly back that I finally landed a fish, and it was big and beautiful and so much fun. I moved to Arizona, and then I started hanging out at a fly shop there so that I could just get to know where I should go fishing. And in that time, I met my husband, Jim. But what I learned is that there weren't a lot of women going to all of these events. Like, I was just soaking up everything. They had all sorts of free evenings where they would have speakers come in, and I was just like, yeah, sign me up. I started hanging out in a fly shop there, and they invited me to work part-time. And all I could think about is, ooh, I'll get a discount on this stuff. This would be great.
So I want to talk a little bit about being one of the only women. Here you are, you're a young woman, you're breaking into an industry that traditionally has not, until recently, really had a lot of female interest associated with it. So how did you navigate the challenges? Or were there challenges for you? Did you find that it was actually easier?
Boy, howdy, there were challenges. But I took those obstacles as challenges. I mean, every now and then I'd get my feelings hurt that someone would want to talk to the dude instead of me behind the counter. But I started fishing a lot, like every minute that I could. And so I started building some confidence and also a reputation to knowing a few things on the local waters. And so that felt very empowering to me. And I was lucky because I worked at a great little shop. Our home water really was about 3 hours away up at Lee's Ferry. Just the most amazingly talented long distance caster, Wendy Gunn, worked and owned the fly shop at Lee's Ferry Anglers. And so I was totally intimidated by her. By the way, she's a dear friend now. We're both fairly young. I mean, she just was really good at everything. And I just kept hearing all about her, and I get to see her some mornings as I go before I go hit the water. And it was just really good to see her face behind the counter, or she would be out front practicing her casting. That was exciting. That was exciting to be around someone who was well known in the industry. And I was just this little girl trying to soak it all in, you know?
Did you ever approach her and formally ask for her mentorship?
No, because I was too intimidated and I was young. And so I didn't want to show my weakness, of course. I think it was a maturity thing. I felt maybe threatened, or maybe there's not room for both of us, or something dumb as I look back now. I'm 51. But absolutely love this industry. And so some of those people who other mentors or other people I looked up to who I may have been intimidated by or envious of, I can tell you today, I'm so lucky to have them as true friends. There's room for everyone. We are stronger together. We have gone through having babies together. And I think when we're young, we think that there isn't room for everyone. But when we're older, we go, no, look at us. Look at everybody. Everybody's doing a great job.
How did you come full circle with her? Because you mentioned that you're now really great friends. So how did you go from being totally intimidated and you wouldn't approach or talk to her to becoming really great friends? Where was that bridge?
During some of the fly fishing shows, the shows, they were huge back in the day. There were 10-day fishing shows that we would go to. There were 5-day shows. It was packed, and we would have casting competitions. And so I think when I started doing some of the casting competitions with her, even though she would beat me every time, or there's always a ton of people who would beat me, but at least I showed up. It was super intimidating to stand up there. There's usually like 5 or 7 of us women casting in front of all of these people who look like they're just sitting there judging you. And we did it. And I think that was building that courage to do that and standing alongside her. That was one thing. The fly fishing industry is a very small family. There are times where I feel very removed from it just because I haven't been to shows or I don't see everybody as often just because my season of life is, different with busy kids. But I think I just miss that because it was so special.
Rachel, you brought up a really interesting point that we talk a lot about on the podcast in different ways. This idea about moving past fear. And you talked about moving past your own fear and your feelings of being intimidated by, standing in front of those people and doing the casting competitions. That completely resonates with me. I've been there, not in a big forum like that, but in
Yeah.
casting competitions where you just wonder, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be able to do this? How did you level up? How did you show up authentically?
I would just say by doing. I have to tell myself this all the time still. I have to show myself proof of all the things I've done already and all the things I'm doing at the moment and all the things I hope to do. And we forget, we kind of can sometimes kind of space that out. And so by working in the fly shop, by being a sponge. I mean, when you work in a shop, you learn so much. It's like water hose of information, practice, putting on reels, tying knots. Like you are in it and talking to tons of people. It's so much fun. I've been lucky enough to work in a very small shop in Arizona for Glenn Tenon. I also moved to work for the fly shop in Redding, which is a huge operation. I was working with Mel Krieger and so many other wonderful people. And then I worked at Leland Fly Fishing in Sonoma, California. So you're really immersed in knowledge and experience and doing things. You can't help but become competent and then build your confidence along the way. There are times where, again, I keep forgetting the things I've done. And I try to now help other people remind themselves of all the cool things that they've done and also the cool things that they're doing. We all need that reminder.
I agree. I think that that's a really important point. So you now co-own a business, a fly fishing based business with your husband, Jim. I'd like to dive into the story about how you met Jim because it's a great one of perseverance and how an unexpected friendship blossomed into something more. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I am so excited to tell the story because we are coming up on our 20-year anniversary of being married. Now, we were together a long time before that, but initially I was with a boyfriend at the time and I was looking for this fly shop. back in the day, there used to be these little booths that had phones in them. Could not find the stinking fly shop. And so I go to this gas station, I pick up the phone, and Jim answers the phone, complete fly fishing. And all of a sudden I went, huh, like the voice just kind of was different to me. Different as in good, like Eddie Vedder voice, you know? So then I hang up the phone. My boyfriend and I head over to the shop. I got to find the fly shop, and this is the shop that really opened up so many doors to my life. We met, we worked together. We were just friends for a very long time. And we had a lot of fun working behind the counter together in this little shop and watching old Billy Pate videos and just telling stories. And so he ended up getting a job guiding in Chile. And during that time, I got an offer to go work for the fly shop in Reading. We're in our mid 20s, and he's living the dream down in Chile. I get this super cool job running the Mel Krieger fly fishing schools and camps, and I'm traveling, I'm doing all this fun stuff. And we meet up in Idaho because I got sent to go to the second International Women Fly Fishers Festival in Sun Valley, Idaho. So I was up there, he was there, and then he left. Like we both went back to our lives. He went on his way to Chile, and I came back to California working, and I got a text. Oh, I'm sorry, not a text. I got a fax, a love fax that was a handwritten full page fax from Chile. It was filled with words. I mean, he is an amazing writer. I still have that fax, and I got it laminated for him a few years back because I just held on to it. But we just kept in touch. And so when he came back from Chile, he decided to come by for a few days because I was living in Reading, and we'd go fishing the Pitt River and the Lower Sac, and it was just fabulous. And then he left for Alaska. So it was a very interesting sort of relationship in the beginning. So I'd say that one was our first date when he came to California. And the second date, he flew me up to Alaska in October at the end of his season. And I was like, damn straight, this is good stuff. Because I'd never been to Alaska. We fished the Naknek River for like 3 days. We went to the Brooks River one day. That was amazing. Oh my gosh, like what a trip. It's such a cool place.
But a beautiful story. I mean, who can say that they received a love fax from Chile and then got flown up to Alaska to go fish the Naknek? That's amazing. What a great way to start your adventure together.
And we continued that. We did a lot of long distance because, again, we were in that season of proving ourselves in our careers, really building our careers, but staying tight. I fell in love with Jim through his letters to me that he would write every week from Alaska. He would mail them out. They're just beautiful. And so, still to this day, I mean, I'm easy. You don't have to go to the jewelry store. I just ask for a note, a letter from him, and man, they make a difference for me. We cannot believe how old we are. We're kind of he just turned 50, and we can't believe we almost have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. Lately, we've been kind of reminding ourselves that we were cool back in the day. We take off a few months and we go to Chile and Argentina together, or we travel, on our own. Gee whiz, all I do is grocery shop now.
Well, I wouldn't say, Rachel, that that's all you do. And I would say that you're still pretty cool because, in addition to all this fly fishing stuff that we've been talking about, you're also a certified health and wellness coach. And you're working with clients that are all over the country. So tell us a little bit about that. What led you to pursue that particular path?
Having a fly fishing business, it's a very seasonal business, depending on where you live. You will have times where you will be earning income, and you will have months where you're not. And so I really wanted to keep doing what I was doing in the fly fishing industry, still having that time and space, and also time to raise my kids. So I explored to see if health coaching could work for us. And I started helping people really create healthy habits that they can sustain, gain some momentum in their health. And the beautiful thing about that, and you talk about this all the time with your mindset and living intentionally in our habits. We either have good habits or poor habits. When you start to create that momentum, you start to notice all the other good things in your life too. And so when you feel good, you do good. And, I'd like to say, oh, it was great. I've always researched this and always thought this is what I wanted to do. I had no idea what it was really all about in the beginning. And I was also in a really bad space too, because I don't know if it was my version of a midlife crisis. That's what I like to call it. It was really a hard, hard time. And so I knew that the only way something's going to change is if something actually changes. Also learned that if I want change, the only way I can create change is within. And that is how I handle the exterior, the environmental, the external things that are happening. I have to figure out how I want to handle those. Being a mom was really, really hard for me and not what I envisioned it would have been. I wanted to be a better mom and I wanted to be myself again. And so I reached out to a friend who I learned from and really felt empowered to take on better habits in my life because I needed to save my damn self.
And you talk about 4 things, right? You talk about these habits of mindset, of education, health-based education, sustainable habits, and of course, proper nutrition, and how all of these work together to create transformational change. What does this actually look like? And do you have any tips for getting started when it totally seems overwhelming?
Yeah, I think initially what I like to do is do a health assessment with people because that's really a time for when I learn about the person, but really it's where the other person, the person who is wanting to work on their changes or their health or whatever it is, they kind of get a where am I? Because they're telling me. Saying it out loud makes it real, really acknowledging where we are and then asking the right questions to figure out where we want to be. And so just kind of getting a baseline of where we are in this moment. What do we want to work on? What does that look like now? That's one thing. So accountability and really helping someone understand if they're ready or not. They really need to be ready to make a change. It was the right time for me. Honestly, I said no 3 times before I said yes because I was like, no, I've never done anything like that before. I don't know about that. I'm not really sure. I don't really have the, whatever my excuse was. And so nowadays, what I've learned is when we take ownership and say, where are my excuses right now? What obstacles are you putting in front of yourself, keeping you from moving forward? So for me, my excuse in the beginning was my kids. I kept saying, they're sucking the life out of me. I'm just so tired. They just wear me down. I'm so frustrated. I don't like how I am. And what I soon changed, which was my mindset when I realized I am in charge, right? That doesn't mean control because we're all, love to be control freaks, but it really is feeling in charge. But when I realized I want my kids to be my reason why I'm doing these things and not the excuse anymore. That was a huge one for me. That's a mindset shift.
And you've made a lot of other shifts as well. I mean, clearly you're not sitting on the couch every night crying and lamenting. What does it look like, Rachel, for you to be the best version of yourself?
Well, to accept that you're always learning. And so just because you have a good day doesn't mean tomorrow's going to be that way too. Try to create those healthy habits so that you can actually sustain on a daily basis, even on your hardest days. And all those little things add up and make a huge difference. One thing I know we share is the time we take in the morning writing a gratitude journal. That was a huge game changer for me years ago. And so whenever I pull away from it sometimes, I'm back at it. I do it every day. I've been doing it for, I don't know, like 70 days or something now. It helps me notice the life I'm living every single day. Those little things, all those things add up. I am so grateful for hot coffee in the morning. I love it. When we stop noticing and having that awareness around us, that's when I don't feel like we're really living, right? Like really feel like we're alive. When we feel like we're alive, we smell things, we taste things, we feel things, we have chills. Remember that and feed that. What you build upon grows. And so put that energy there where you want to keep feeling alive.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I wanted to ask you, besides gratitude, what really gets you and keeps you motivated?
Has changed through the years. I mean, I love accountability. I love that. And so when I'm being accountable with myself, which sometimes is saying celebrating myself on social media or a client or anything, that helps someone else recognize and pause and say, you know what? I had some hot coffee today too, and it was damn good. And they pause and they enjoy it, right? They enjoy that part. I have a lot of family history in the not so healthy department. I will say my family genes are not the strongest. My mom passed about a year and a half ago. For years, she was on 24 different medications. She was immobile. There were a lot of things that really was hard. And I have learned so many great things from her, but I've also learned with things I don't want my future to look like. And so I've got great motivation to always work on my health.
When you think about your future and you're talking about the person whom you would like to become, I'm sure you also have to think about the legacy that you want to leave for your children or the most important takeaways that you want them to internalize. What do these encompass?
I applaud my children because they are always up for an adventure. And I think Jim and I have something to do with that. But that is something they have always been like. They've always been up to giving something a try. And as we know, when we give things a try, when we go travel, like travel is one thing, it just opens up our eyes even bigger and we see so much more. I want them to always be adventurous and to be brave to try new things. And I also want to live a life of no regrets. I know that everything that happens in our life is a gift, even the shitty stuff. The shitty stuff typically isn't even that shitty down the line because it's just been another opportunity to learn something else. Like there are times where we're walking through the mud where we are maybe not feeling like we are at the top of our game or doing everything we want to be doing, feeling the way we want to be feeling. And that's okay too, because sometimes we're supposed to slow down and walk through that mud. I think just having that awareness of looking within to see we're all just doing the best we can. I mean, I have no regret the way I helped my parents the last couple years, like the last part of my mom's life. And I feel like even losing her was such a beautiful gift she gave me. Just that whole end of life experience that unleashed the strength. I had no idea where it came from, but also this beautiful, peaceful feeling. As far as legacy goes, I have a desire to also write a book because one of the greatest things my mom did was she wrote a book. And when I read it, I'm closer to her.
So I distinctly remember, Rachel, that when you and I very first met, it was through a phone call,
Yes.
actually. And we had a conversation, and I was, as you just said, walking through the mud. It was a distinctly difficult period in my life, probably a period that, as you just mentioned, I needed to slow down. I really didn't want to navigate the hard stuff, but I had no choice but to navigate through the hard stuff. And you were very, very kind. And I just remember you being very compassionate
Mm.
towards me and meeting me where I was at with what I needed at the time. So you talk a lot about living this life with no regrets and living very intentionally. What does that look like?
I would say that we all have pending files in our head. Sometimes we make lists of what those things are that we want to do or want to accomplish, and we just keep putting it off. We keep saying, "Oh, I've always wanted to try this," or "I've always wanted to, hike this or do that or fish this," or there are things in our lives that we can do that really don't have any obstacles, because you know what? When we want to do something, we do it. We do it. We have to. And we can keep it in our head, or we can share it with someone. We can write it down, which is also very powerful. There's a ton of research just about the intentionality of taking what's in your head and putting it on paper, using handwriting to do that. That's great brain health. But I would say that telling your pending file, it's now or never. Now is the time. You get to a point where you start losing people in your life. It's all going to happen to all of us. We don't know when our time is. But I've had people in my life who have left very quickly and unexpectedly. What are we waiting for? Like, I just want to yell it. What am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? Why am I waiting for this book? And we can all go through that. I have nothing important to say. No one's going to read it or listen to my podcast or do whatever it may be. But that's not a fact, right? That is just our little silly story we tell ourselves, but it's now. Now is the time.
Well, and then you do it, and then you see it grow organically or become something that you never could have imagined. And maybe that leads to the next thing that you never could have imagined. It's a beautiful, mysterious, wonderful process if you step into it and you give yourself the opportunity to do whatever it is that you're looking forward to doing. On that note, Rachel, what's on your bucket list? You just mentioned a book. What else is on that list? What else do you need to tell your pending file that it's now or never?
Well, the book is the big one, and that's the one that's really been weighing on myself. I did start an ebook that I'm doing to just kind of get my feet wet to start the process, but that's one that I am actually working on, and just doing a little bit every day. I am trying to give myself some timeline goals because we all work better with a little bit of pressure, right? Structural tension. I'm a big fan of time blocking. I think that's important. Other things on my bucket list: to take my kids to Alaska and Argentina. I'd love to run a 5K as a family. I mean, this is the thing about when you start to live without regrets. You go, huh, what else can I put on my bucket list? Of course, I have them. Not that I've done everything. There's more things I want to do. I recently got to kind of spearhead a project in our community, a mural project. And it just really was one of those pending things for a while. And then I just kept saying, now or never. What am I waiting on? And so I got to just be a part of something bigger, which I'm a big fan of. And so every day when I take the dog, I see this beautiful mural. And so do hundreds of other people. And I just absolutely love it. And of course, now I just want to do more and more and more. Every morning I write my gratitude, and then I write in the presence of, like, it's already happening. We travel as a family. We're running a 5K together. We are making an impact in our community and inspiring other people. I love people. I get energized by being in a room with lots of great people, or even just talking with one person. People fill me up, and I love that energy. And so I can tell when I need and want more of it. And so I'm really trying to be conscious of that. That's one thing. My mom did not retire very well. Some people do, some people don't. And she was a people person. And when she retired, she just kind of stayed home. And I think that was just the beginning of the end for her. I'm so conscious of that. And so even though it's like, ugh, sometimes you don't want to do things, I still say, yes, I'm glad I did. Glad I did. I mean, I think one of my favorite ways to look at life is kind of how the obstacle is the way, how we have a choice on everything. We do. We have a choice. We make choices nonstop every single day, whether to make our bed, whether to have breakfast or not, whether to do these things. And if we pay attention to all these choices, maybe we'll sit taller and realize we do have confidence. We do have worthiness. We do have things that we can do when sometimes there are days that we forget. It's up to us to make those choices and recognize it's not up to everybody else. We can choose to rise above when things get crazy, or we can choose to fall apart. It's okay to fall apart now and then, but we have a choice to make a change or make a difference.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for joining us today and for sharing your immense knowledge and your passion for fishing, for health, and for wellness. You're such an inspiration and you're making a difference in a lot of lives. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Without your support, none of this would be possible. So be sure to share the podcast with someone whom you know could benefit from Rachel's wisdom, and be sure to connect with her through the links in the show notes. Then tune in again next Friday for another episode of Two Gals and a Mic.